The rain didn't wash away the blood on the deck of the Golden Swan. It only made it slicker. Lightning tore the sky open, illuminating the carnage in staccato flashes of white and gray. Thunder rumbled, indistinguishable from the roar of the cannons. Captain Serafina, the Viper Sterling, stepped over the body of a royal guardsman. She didn't look down. Her boots, heavy with iron and salt, thudded against the wet wood as she marched toward the captain's quarters. Her cutlass was drawn, the steel stained crimson, reflecting the burning sails above. She kicked the ornate door open with a force that shattered the lock. "Get on the ground!" she roared, stepping into the room, bringing the smell of ozone and death with her. "Hands where I can see them." She expected to find a cowering nobleman. She expected weeping. She expected a pampered prince begging for his life, offering gold, titles, anything to keep his head attached to his neck. She did not expect silence. In the center of the room, sitting in a velvet armchair as if he were lounging in a garden rather than a sinking ship, was Prince Julian of Ethelgard. He held a crystal goblet of wine in one hand. He didn't spill a drop, even as the ship listed heavily to the port side. He looked up at Serafina, his blue eyes eerily calm, scanning her from her tricorn hat to her blood-spattered boots. He checked a gold pocket watch with his free hand. "You're 12 minutes late, Captain," Julian said, his voice smooth, cutting through the noise of the battle outside. "I assumed you had run into trouble with the starboard cannons." Serafina froze for a fraction of a second. Her grip on her sword tightened. "Get up, Your Highness. You are coming with me." Julian took a final sip of wine, set the glass down on the table, and stood up. He smoothed the front of his silk coat. He extended his wrists toward her, wrists that had never known a day of hard labor. "Lead the way," he whispered, a faint, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "But be careful with the merchandise, Viper. I am worth more than your entire fleet." Serafina narrowed her eyes. She had captured dozens of royals. They all smelled of fear. This one smelled of ozone. She grabbed him by the collar and shoved him toward the door. She thought she had caught a prey. She had no idea she had just leashed a wolf. 3:15, Chapter 1. The Raid. 30 minutes earlier, the raid had begun like any other. Serafina's ship, the Sea Viper, had emerged from the fog bank of the Serpent Straits like a phantom. They had caught the Golden Swan unawares. It was the crown jewel of the Ethelgard Navy, a transport vessel rumored to be carrying the king's youngest son to a diplomatic summit in the south. For Serafina, it wasn't politics. It was payday. "Grappling hooks!" shouted Bax, her quartermaster, a man whose face was more scar tissue than skin. Iron claws flew across the gap between the ships, biting into the railing of the Royal Galleon. Pirates swung across, screaming war cries. The Royal Guards fought bravely, but they were soldiers trained for formation drills, not the chaotic, brutal dance of boarding actions. Serafina moved through the melee like a storm. She parried a spear thrust, spun, and kicked a guard into the open hatch. She didn't fight with anger. She fought with efficiency. Every swing of her blade had a purpose. "Secure the hold," she ordered, her voice commanding over the din of steel clashing against steel. "I want the gold, the spice, and the boy. Leave the rest." The resistance on the deck crumbled quickly. The sailors of the Golden Swan surrendered, throwing down their weapons. Serafina wiped the rain from her eyes and headed for the stern. The intelligence report had been specific. Prince Julian would be in the captain's quarters. Now, marching him across the deck at sword point, Serafina felt a prickle of unease on the back of her neck. The prince walked with an easy grace, stepping over bodies without flinching. He didn't look horrified by the slaughter. He looked observant. His eyes darted to the rigging, to the placement of her men, to the weapons they carried. "Move it," Serafina growled, prodding him in the back with her blade. They crossed the plank back to the Sea Viper. "Cast off," Serafina shouted. "Cut the lines. We disappear before the escort ships realize we were here." The pirates cheered, dragging chests of gold and crates of silk across the deck. But Serafina didn't cheer. She shoved Julian toward the hatch leading to the brig. "Bax!" she called out. "Put him in the iron cell, double chains, and search him. If he has so much as a hairpin, I want it found." "Aye, Captain," Bax grinned, revealing his missing teeth. He grabbed the prince's arm roughly. "Come on, Your Highness. Let's see if you bleed blue." Julian didn't resist. He glanced back at Serafina one last time before descending into the dark. That smile was still there. It wasn't the smile of a hostage. It was the smile of a guest who knew something the host didn't. The brig of the Sea Viper was a damp, miserable place. It smelled of bilge water, unwashed bodies, and fear. The iron cell was reserved for high-value targets. It was small, cramped, and cold. Serafina waited an hour before going down. She needed the adrenaline of the battle to fade. She needed a clear head for the negotiation, or rather, the extortion. When she unlocked the heavy wooden door to the brig, she found Julian sitting on a crate. Bax had stripped him of his fine silk coat, leaving him in a white linen shirt and dark trousers. The chains on his wrists and ankles were heavy enough to anchor a small boat. "Comfortable?" Serafina asked, leaning against the bars. Julian looked up. He was tossing a gold coin, one he must have hidden from Bax, across his knuckles. Back and forth. Click, click, click. "The ambience is rustic," Julian drawled, "but the hospitality leaves something to be desired. Is this how you treat all your investments?" "You aren't an investment yet," Serafina said coldly. "You are a lottery ticket. We just have to see if your father is willing to pay the price." Julian laughed. It was a dry, dark sound that echoed off the damp walls. "My father," Julian said, catching the coin in his palm with a snap. "King Alaric the Stern. Do you know why they call him that, Captain?" "Because he taxes the hell out of the colonies," Serafina replied. "Because he values power over blood," Julian corrected. "I am the third son, the spare to the spare. My brother, Marcus, is the heir. My brother, Valerius, is the general. And I am the disappointment, the scholar, the fop who likes wine and poetry." He stood up, the chains rattling. He walked to the bars, staring Serafina down. Despite the height difference, he was taller than her by a head, and the bars between them, he didn't seem imprisoned. "He won't pay," Julian said softly. "Not for me. Every father pays," Serafina insisted, though a seed of doubt planted itself in her chest. "Especially when I start sending him pieces of you. A finger first, then an ear." Julian leaned in. His eyes were intense, swirling with a mix of amusement and ice. "You threaten me with pain, Captain Sterling? You think torture frightens me? It should. Pain is just information," he whispered. "It tells you you are still alive. But listen to me carefully. If you cut me, make sure you kill me. Because if I get loose and I decide you are an enemy, I will burn this ship to the waterline with you on it." Serafina felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't a bluff. She had looked into the eyes of killers before. She knew the look. It was the look of a man who had crossed the line between violence and morality a long time ago. But this was a prince, pampered royal. It didn't make sense. "Brave words," Serafina scoffed, pushing away from the bars. "We'll see how brave you are when you've gone 2 days without water." She turned to leave. "Captain," Julian called out. She stopped. "The Golden Swan wasn't sailing alone," he said. "The Iron Armada is tracking it, shadowing it from 20 miles back. They will be here by sunrise." Serafina turned back slowly. "You're lying. The scouts saw nothing." "My father is paranoid," Julian shrugged. "He uses ghost ships, black sails, no flags. They are coming, and they aren't coming to save me. They are coming to ensure no witnesses survive the tragic pirate attack that killed his son." Serafina stared at him. If he was telling the truth, she was sailing into a trap. "Why tell me?" she asked. "Because," Julian smiled, "I prefer your damp cell to the bottom of the ocean." Serafina stormed up to the deck. "Bax, Get the lookout to the crow's nest. Now. What is it, Captain? Eyes on the horizon, southeast quadrant. Look for black sails. The crew moved with disciplined urgency. Serafina gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. If the Iron Armada was out there, they were in deep trouble. The Armada was the king's personal execution squad. Heavily armored frigates that didn't take prisoners. Captain! The lookout scream was shrill with panic. Sails. 3 of them. Moving fast. Serafina raised her spyglass. Through the shifting fog, she saw them. 3 massive ships, their hulls painted matte black, their sails dark as bruised bruises. They cut through the water with unnatural speed. They were waiting for us, she whispered. They're closing the gap, Bax yelled. They have the wind. Hard to port, Serafina commanded. Take us into the Reaper's Reef. It's the only way to lose them. The reef, Bax paled. Captain, those rocks will tear the hull apart. Better the rocks than the hangman. Move. The Sea Viper banked hard, the wood groaning under the strain. The chase was on. For hours, they played cat and mouse in the treacherous waters of the Reaper's Reef. Jagged pillars of stone jutted out of the churning sea like teeth. The Armada ships, larger and heavier, had to slow down. But the Sea Viper, smaller and agile, weaved through the deadly maze. Cannon fire erupted behind them. Boom! Boom! Water geysers exploded around the ship. They aren't trying to board us, Bax screamed over the noise. They're trying to sink us. They want the prince dead, Serafina realized. He was telling the truth. A cannonball struck the railing near her, sending deadly splinters flying. Serafina felt a sharp pain in her shoulder as would shards cut through her coat. She gritted her teeth and held the wheel. Return fire. Stern chasers. The pirates fired back, but their smaller cannons bounced harmlessly off the armored hulls of the pursuers. We can't outrun them forever, Bax yelled. We need a miracle. Below deck, the ship shuddered violently. Dust fell from the ceiling of the brig. Julian stood up. He listened to the rhythm of the cannon fire. He calculated the distance. 3 ships, frigates, standard formation. He looked at the lock on his cell door. It was a heavy iron mechanism, crude but strong. Well, Julian muttered to himself, I suppose I should lend a hand. I hate swimming. He reached into his mouth and pulled out a small, thin piece of metal he had tucked between his gum and his cheek. A lockpick. Bax had searched his pockets, but he hadn't checked his mouth. Julian knelt by the lock. His hands, still chained, moved with a blur of speed. Click, scrape, snap. The door swung open. He stepped out into the corridor. A guard was standing there, looking terrified as the ship rocked. Hey! The guard shouted, raising his pistol. Get back in. Julian didn't let him finish. He lunged forward, the heavy chains on his wrists swinging like a flail. He struck the guard in the temple with the iron cuffs. The man dropped like a sack of potatoes. Julian grabbed the keys from the guard's belt and unlocked his shackles. He rubbed his wrists, sighing in relief. He grabbed the guard's cutlass. He tested the weight. A bit unbalanced, he critiqued. But it will do. He ran up the stairs toward the deck. When Julian burst onto the main deck, chaos reigned. The Sea Viper was cornered. One of the black ships, the Obsidian, had managed to pull alongside them despite the rocks. Boarding planks were crashing down. Armada soldiers, clad in black steel armor, were flooding the deck. They were slaughtering the pirates. Serafina was near the helm, fighting 3 men at once. She was good, Julian noted. Fast, vicious. But she was tired, and she was bleeding from her shoulder. A massive soldier raised a warhammer behind her, ready to crush her skull. She didn't see him. Duck, Julian said, though she couldn't hear him. He sprinted across the deck. He didn't run like a panicked prisoner. He moved like smoke. He vaulted over a barrel, slid under a swinging sword, and drove his cutlass into the armpit of the soldier with the hammer. The soldier screamed and dropped the weapon. Serafina spun around, eyes wide. She saw the prince, free, armed, and standing over the body of her enemy. "You," she gasped. "We can discuss my escape later, Captain," Julian shouted over the roar of battle. "Right now, I believe we have a mutual pest problem." More soldiers poured onto the deck. Julian smiled. The boredom was gone. In its place was a cold, terrifying focus. He engaged. It wasn't a fight. It was a massacre. Julian moved with a precision that no pirate or soldier could match. He dodged attacks by millimeters. He used his enemy's momentum against them. He didn't hack and slash, he pierced vital organs. Throat, heart, lung. One soldier lunged. Julian sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, snapped it, and threw him overboard. Another tried to shoot him. Julian deflected the pistol barrel with his sword, kicked the man in the knee, and silenced him with a pommel strike. Serafina watched, stunned, even as she fought her own opponents. The pampered prince was gone. In his place was a whirlwind of death. "Who the hell is he?" Bax shouted, hacking at a soldier. "I don't know," Serafina yelled back. "But don't shoot him." Together, the pirate and the prince cleared the deck. They fought back to back near the mainmast. Serafina's raw fury and Julian's icy precision were a deadly combination. "The captain of that ship," Julian pointed to the obsidian with his bloodied sword. "If we kill him, they retreat. It's standard Armada doctrine." "He's on the quarterdeck," Serafina pointed, "surrounded by guards." "Cover me," Julian said. "What?" "Just keep them busy." Julian didn't wait. He ran toward the railing. He leaped onto a swinging rope, soaring across the gap between the two ships. He landed on the enemy deck, rolling to his feet. He was alone on the enemy ship, surrounded by 50 soldiers. The enemy captain laughed. "One man? You send one man." Julian straightened his shirt, flicking blood from his blade. "I am not just a man," Julian whispered. He unleashed hell. He cut a path through the guards, moving so fast he was a blur. He reached the captain in seconds. The captain drew his sword, but he was too slow. Julian disarmed him with a flick of his wrist and held the blade to the captain's throat. "Signal the retreat," Julian ordered calmly, "or I turn your command structure into a graveyard." The captain, terrified by this demon in a silk shirt, screamed the order. "Retreat! Fall back!" The Armada soldiers on Serafina's ship scrambled back to their own vessel. They cut the grappling lines. The black ship drifted away, its captain held hostage by the prince until the gap was too wide to jump back. Then, Julian shoved the captain away and leaped onto the railing. He jumped across the widening gap of water, catching the rigging of the Sea Viper. He slid down to the deck, landing softly in front of Serafina. He was breathing a little heavier, a smudge of blood on his cheek, but otherwise composed. The entire pirate crew stared at him in silence. The wind howled. The rain poured. Julian tossed the borrowed cutlass onto the deck. "That," he said, brushing dust off his shoulder, "was exhilarating." Serafina marched him straight to her cabin. She didn't put him back in the brig. She didn't chain him. She realized now that chains were useless against him. She slammed the door and pointed her pistol at his chest. "Sit," she ordered. Julian sat in the same velvet chair where she had found him on the Golden Swan. He poured himself a drink from her decanter. "Who are you?" Serafina demanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline and rage. "Prince Julian is a drunkard, a poet, a waste of space. You just killed 20 armed men without breaking a sweat." Julian took a sip of the rum. He grimaced. "A bit harsh, this vintage." "Answer me." He set the glass down. The playfulness vanished from his face. The cold, dead eyes of the killer returned. "I told you, Captain, my father is a paranoid man. He believes power is maintained through fear and elimination." He leaned forward. "I was not trained to be a ruler. I was trained to be the king's shadow. Since I was 6 years old, I have been taught to fight, to poison, to infiltrate, and to kill. Whenever a duke got too ambitious, whenever a rebel leader needed to have an accident, I was sent." Serafina lowered the pistol slightly. She had heard the legends. The shadow was a ghost story sailors told to scare each other. "You're the monster," she whispered. "I was a tool," Julian corrected sharply. "A weapon wielded by my father, until he ordered me to kill my sister, Ilara. She was becoming too popular with the people. He saw her as a threat to my brother's claim. He looked at his hands. I couldn't do it. I warned her. I helped her flee to the north. And then I ran. I boarded the Golden Swan to disappear. I let you capture me, Serafina. I needed to get off that ship before the Armada sank it. I figured a pirate ship was the last place they would look for the king's assassin." "You used us," Serafina hissed. "You used my crew as a shield. And I just saved your crew from slaughter," Julian countered. "We are even." "Even?" Serafina laughed incredulously. "The entire Iron Armada knows we have you now. They will hunt us to the ends of the earth. You brought a death sentence to my ship. I brought you an opportunity." Julian stood up. He walked to the map pinned to her wall. He traced a line with his finger. "You are a pirate. You want gold. You want freedom." He turned to her. "I know the shipping routes of the royal treasury. I know the codes to the vaults in the sunken city. I know where the king hides his black money." He extended a hand to her. "The king wants us both dead now, Captain. We can die alone or we can work together. I can make you the richest pirate who ever lived. I can give you the kingdom's secrets. And what do you want in return?" Serafina asked, looking at his hand. "Freedom. Revenge," Julian said, his voice ice cold. "I want to burn my father's empire to the ground. And I need a ship to do it." Serafina looked at the handsome prince. The assassin. The liar. The most dangerous man she had ever met. She holstered her pistol. She took his hand. "Welcome to the crew, Your Highness," she said. "But if you lie to me again, I won't shoot you. I'll throw you to the sharks." Julian smiled, and this time it looked almost genuine. "I look forward to it, Captain." The storm had passed, but the atmosphere on the Sea Viper remained electric. Prince Julian, or the assassin, as the crew now whispered, was no longer in the brig. But he wasn't exactly free. Serafina had given him the run of the ship, mostly because she knew he had nowhere to go. They were in the middle of the Serpent Straits. To swim was death. Serafina stood at the helm, watching him. He was on the main deck, sitting on a barrel, surrounded by a group of wary pirates. Bax was there, knife in hand, whittling a piece of wood aggressively. "So," Bax grunted, spitting on the deck, "you killed Thorn. Lucky shot, Your Highness." Julian didn't look up from the apple he was peeling with a knife that moved too fast to follow. "Luck is for people who don't know geometry, Mr. Bax." Thorn overextended. I simply corrected his posture. The crew chuckled nervously. "You think you're one of us now?" Another sailor, a giant named Oakhart, sneered. "Just because the captain made a deal? You're still a royal. You've never worked a day in your life." Julian paused. He finished peeling the apple in one long, unbroken ribbon of skin. He tossed the apple to Oakhart, who caught it by reflex. "I know how to tie a bowline knot in the dark," Julian said calmly. "I can navigate by stars in the southern hemisphere, where your constellations are backwards. And I can tell you that the mizzenmast is cracked near the top crosstree. If you don't fix it before the next gale, it will snap and kill everyone on the quarterdeck." Oakhart looked up at the mast. He squinted. "He's bluffing. Go check," Serafina called out from the helm, her voice carrying over the wind. Oakhart climbed the rigging. Minutes later, he shouted down, "The wood is split, Captain. Deep rot." The crew looked at Julian with new eyes. Not just fear now, respect. Serafina gripped the wheel tighter. He was doing it. He was infiltrating her crew. He was charming them, making himself indispensable. It was exactly what a spy would do. "Keep your enemies close," she told herself. "But keep your dagger closer." That evening, Julian knocked on her cabin door. "Enter," she commanded. He walked in carrying a tray of food. "Your cook was terrified to bring this to you. Apparently, you've been in a mood." "I am not in a mood," Serafina snapped, snatching a piece of bread. I am plotting a course to avoid the entire Royal Navy. You said you knew the treasury routes. Prove it. Julian walked to the map table. The candlelight flickered on his face, casting shadows that made his sharp cheekbones look even more severe. He smelled of sea salt and expensive cologne, a lingering scent of his old life. Here, Julian pointed to a cluster of islands near the coast. The citadel of Viridia. It's a fortress port. Viridia is impregnable, Serafina scoffed. Suicide. The front door is impregnable, Julian corrected. But the king is moving the tax collection from the colonies next week. They won't store it in the main vault. They will keep it on the Obsidian Lotus, the flagship anchored in the harbor, ready for transport. The Lotus. Serafina's eyes widened. That ship carries enough gold to buy a kingdom. Exactly. And I know the captain's rotation schedule. I know the blind spot in the lighthouse sweep. And I know that on Tuesday nights, half the garrison is drunk because the commander allows shore leave. Serafina looked at the map, then at him. It was a brilliant plan. It was mad. It was exactly the kind of job she lived for. If we pull this off, Serafina murmured. We are rich. If we pull this off, Julian said, his voice dropping low. I send a message to my father. I steal his gold right from under his nose. He looked up, locking eyes with her. In the cramped cabin, the air felt suddenly thin. They were two predators circling each other. Why do you hate him so much? Serafina asked. He gave you everything. Wealth, power. He gave me a cage, Julian whispered. He made me a murderer before I learned how to read. Do you know what it's like, Serafina? To look in the mirror and see a weapon instead of a person. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers on the map. He wasn't touching her, but she could feel the heat of him. You aren't a weapon anymore, Serafina said, her voice softer than she intended. On this ship, you are just a man who owes me a lot of money. Julian smiled, a genuine, tired smile that transformed his face. I intend to pay my debts, Captain. Every single coin. Serafina watched him trace the route on the map. For the first time in years, she felt a thrill that had nothing to do with gold. It was the thrill of walking on a razor's edge. This man was dangerous. He could kill her in her sleep. He could betray her to the king. But looking at the fire in his eyes, she realized she didn't want to be safe. She wanted to burn the world down with him. And if you are enjoying this high-stakes game of cat and mouse, if you want to see if the pirate and the assassin can actually pull off the greatest heist in history without killing each other first, then make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the storm is just beginning, and you won't want to miss the thunder. Before they could attack Viridia, they needed supplies. The battle with the Armada had depleted their gunpowder and left the Sea Viper battered. They docked at Sirens Bay, a lawless port hidden inside a massive sea cave. It was a place of shadows, thieves, and cheap rum. A place where no questions were asked as long as the coin was good. Stay on the ship, Serafina ordered Julian as she prepped her pistol. Don't be ridiculous. Julian was putting on a heavy cloak, hiding his face. You need me to negotiate for the gunpowder. These merchants will cheat you. I know the market rates. You are the most wanted man in the kingdom, Serafina hissed. There are bounty posters with your face on every wall. That is why I am wearing a hood, Julian deadpanned. And besides, who looks for a prince in a pirate slum? Serafina groaned. Fine, but you don't speak. You don't look at anyone. You are my mute bodyguard. Kinky, Julian smirked. Shut up. They walked through the crowded wooden walkways of Sirens Bay. The air smelled of roasting fish and opium. Eyes watched them from the shadows. Serafina led them to a shop run by an old fence named Greta. Gunpowder. Serafina slapped a bag of coins on the counter. High grade. And don't try to sell me the damp stuff, Greta. The old woman eyed the coins, then looked at the hooded figure behind Serafina. Who's the shadow? Greta croaked. New recruit. Dumb as a post, Serafina lied. Greta narrowed her eyes. She reached under the counter. I heard rumors, Viper. Heard you tangled with the Iron Armada. Heard you have something valuable on board. Serafina's hand went to her pistol. You hear too much, Greta. Suddenly, the back door of the shop kicked open. 4 mercenaries walked in. They wore leather armor and carried crossbows. We heard the same rumors. The leader of the mercs grinned. He held up a wanted poster. Prince Julian, alive or dead, 100,000 gold crowns. He looked at the hooded figure. Take off the hood, pretty boy. Julian didn't move. Serafina stepped in front of him. This is my crewman. You touch him, you lose a hand. We don't want you, Viper, the merc said. Move, or we shoot you both. He raised the crossbow. Serafina drew her pistol, but before she could fire, Julian moved. He didn't draw a weapon. He grabbed a jar of heavy oil from the counter and smashed it into the face of the first mercenary. In the same motion, he grabbed the lit lantern hanging from the ceiling and threw it onto the oil-soaked man. The mercenary screamed as flames engulfed him. Run! Julian grabbed Serafina's hand. They sprinted out of the shop as chaos erupted. The other mercenaries fired their crossbows. Thwack, thwack. Bolts buried themselves in the wood frame of the door. They ran through the crowded market, overturning stalls, dodging confused drunks. You set a man on fire, Serafina yelled as they vaulted over a crate of fish. Improvised distraction, Julian yelled back. Turn left. They turned into a blind alley. Dead end. The 3 remaining mercenaries cornered them. They drew swords. Nowhere to run, Your Highness, the leader snarled. Serafina drew her cutlass. I'll take the big one. You take the ugly ones. Julian dropped his cloak. He wasn't holding a sword. He pulled 2 long, thin daggers from boots. Let's dance, he whispered. The fight was brutal and fast in the narrow alley. Serafina clashed with the leader, steel ringing against steel. She was a brawler, using her elbows and knees. Julian was a surgeon. He weaved under a sword swing, slicing the tendons of his attacker's wrist. He spun, kicking the second man into the wall, and pinning him there with a dagger through the shoulder. Serafina kicked the leader in the gut, but he grabbed her coat, throwing her against the brick wall. He raised his sword to impale her. A silver flash flew through the air. Julian's second dagger buried itself in the mercenary's throat. The man gurgled and collapsed. Silence returned to the alley. Serafina slid down the wall, breathing hard. Julian walked over, retrieving his dagger from the dead man's neck. He wiped it on the mercenary's shirt. He reached a hand down to Serafina. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice was urgent, stripped of all sarcasm. He checked her for wounds, his hands hovering over her arms. I'm fine. Serafina batted his hands away, but her heart was pounding. He had saved her. Again. We need to get back to the ship, Julian said, scanning the rooftops. There will be more. Julian, Serafina said. He looked at her. You fight well for a mute bodyguard. He smirked, the adrenaline making his eyes shine. I had a good teacher. Life. That night, back on the ship, safe in open waters, Serafina couldn't sleep. She went up to the deck. Julian was there, leaning on the railing, looking at the moon. He had a bandage on his arm where a crossbow bolt had grazed him during the escape. She walked up beside him. Does it hurt? She asked. Only when I laugh, he replied softly. Serafina looked at his hands, the hands of an assassin. But tonight, they looked like the hands of a man who was tired of running. Why did you really save me back there? She asked. You could have let them kill me. You could have vanished in the chaos. Julian turned to face her. The moonlight washed him in silver. I told you, he said. I need a ship. Bullshit, Serafina challenged. You don't need anyone. Julian looked down. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long, jagged scar running up his forearm. Do you see this? He asked. I got this when I was 12. My father made me kill a prisoner who had betrayed us. The man fought back. I hesitated. I almost died. My father didn't help me. He watched. He wanted me to learn that hesitation is death. He looked up at Serafina. My whole life, people have either wanted to use me or kill me. No one has ever stood in front of me to protect me. Until today. Serafina remembered the moment in the shop. This is my crewman. You touch him, you lose a hand. You stood in front of the crossbow, Julian whispered. For me. You're my investment, Serafina said. Her voice thick with emotion she tried to hide. Can't let you get damaged. Julian stepped closer. He was so close she could count the eyelashes framing his blue eyes. Is that all I am, Serafina? An investment. He didn't call her captain. He called her Serafina. She looked at his lips. She thought about the dagger he carried. She thought about the danger. And she realized she didn't care. We have a job to do, Prince, she whispered, backing away before she did something stupid. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we steal from the king. She walked away, leaving him on the deck, but she felt his eyes on her back. And for the first time, the thought of being watched by the shadow didn't scare her. It thrilled her. The game had changed. They weren't just allies anymore. They were something much more dangerous. The citadel of Viridia was a fortress carved into the side of a black cliff, overlooking a bay filled with jagged rocks. At its center sat the royal treasury, a vault rumored to be impenetrable. Midnight. The fog was thick, perfect for thieves. Serafina and Julian clung to the wet stones of the outer wall, 50 feet above the crashing waves. You said there was a blind spot, Serafina whispered, her fingers aching from the climb. There is, Julian replied, hanging beside her effortlessly. The lighthouse rotation is 20 seconds. We have a 3-second window between the sweep of the light and the sentry patrol. On my mark. The massive beam of light swept over their heads, illuminating the mist. 3, 2, 1. Move! They vaulted over the parapet, landing silently on the stone walkway. 2 guards were turning the corner. Before Serafina could draw her weapon, Julian was moving. He slipped behind them like a phantom. 2 quick strikes to the pressure points on their necks, and the guards slumped unconscious. Show off, Serafina muttered, dragging one body into the shadows. Efficiency, Captain, Julian winked. They moved deeper into the fortress. Julian knew every corridor, every trap. He disabled pressure plates with a knife blade. He bypassed locks with a hairpin. He was in his element, a lethal ghost haunting his own kingdom. They reached the Vault of Kings. A massive iron door stood between them and the wealth of an empire. This is it, Julian whispered. The code changes weekly, but my brother Marcus uses patterns based on historical dates. If I'm right, he spun the heavy tumblers. Left, right, left, click. The heavy gears groaned. The door swung open. Serafina's heart raced. She stepped inside, expecting mountains of gold. The vault was empty, save for one man sitting on a wooden stool in the center of the room. General Valerius, Julian's older brother. He was clad in full-plate armor, holding a massive greatsword. Around him, the shadows of the room moved. 20 elite royal guards stepped out from the darkness, crossbows aimed at Serafina and Julian. Hello, little brother, Valerius smiled cruelly. Father sent his regards. Serafina froze. It was a setup. You knew, Valerius said, standing up. You knew the codes. You knew the routes. But you forgot one thing, Julian. I know you. I knew you couldn't resist trying to hurt Father's wallet. Valerius looked at Serafina. And you brought a pet pirate. How quaint. Serafina looked at Julian. For a second, doubt crept in. Did he lead her here? Was this his way of buying his pardon? Julian? She whispered, her hand hovering over her pistol. Julian didn't look at her. He looked at his brother. His face was a mask of pure, cold rage. Valerius, Julian said calmly, you always were Father's favorite dog. And you were his favorite mistake. Valerius spat. Surrender, and I'll make your death quick. Resist, and I will let the guards have the girl before we hang her. Julian stepped forward. He moved between Serafina and the 20 crossbows. He spread his arms, shielding her with his body. Serafina, Julian said quietly, not breaking eye contact with his brother. Do you trust me? We're surrounded by 20 bolts, Julian, she hissed. Trust is a bit expensive right now. On the count of 3, drop to the floor. What? 1. Julian, don't. 2. Julian reached into his coat. Kill them, Valerius roared. 3. Serafina dropped. Julian didn't draw a weapon. He threw 3 smoke bombs he had crafted from the gunpowder they bought in Siren's Bay. Boom! The vault filled with thick, choking gray smoke. The crossbows fired blindly, bolts pinging off the stone walls. Move! Julian grabbed Serafina's hand, pulling her into the blinding fog. Close the doors! Valerius screamed somewhere in the smoke. Julian kicked a guard in the knee, hearing the bone snap. Serafina fired her pistol at a shadow, hearing a grunt of pain. They fought back to back, a whirlwind of chaos in the confined space. They reached the vault door. Julian slammed it shut, spinning the wheel to lock the guards inside. That won't hold them for long, Serafina yelled. It doesn't have to. Julian sprinted down the corridor. We need to get to the roof. They burst out of the tower door onto the ramparts of the citadel. The wind was howling. The ocean churned hundreds of feet below. There, Serafina pointed. The Sea Viper is signaling. Her ship was waiting in the cove, but they had to get down. Before they could move, the heavy oak door behind them exploded. General Valerius stepped out, pieces of wood shrapnel bouncing off his armor. He had broken through the vault. Running away again, Julian? Valerius roared, raising his greatsword. Face me. Julian stopped. He looked at the rope zipline they had prepared for the escape. Go, Julian told Serafina. Slide down. I'll hold him. He'll kill you. Serafina grabbed his arm. He's twice your size. He's strong, Julian smiled sadly, but he's slow. Go, Captain. That's an order. I don't take orders from royalty. Serafina drew her cutlass. We fight together. Julian looked at her, surprised. Then, a fierce pride burned in his eyes. He drew his twin daggers. Together, he agreed. Valerius charged. The fight was brutal. The general was a tank, his great sword cleaving chunks of stone from the battlements. Julian was the Viper, dodging, weaving, landing small cuts on the armor gaps. Serafina was the distractor, firing her pistol to keep Valerius off balance. Valerius backhanded Serafina, sending her crashing into the stone wall. She slumped, dazed. No! Julian screamed. Distracted, Julian took a heavy kick to the chest. He fell near the edge of the cliff. Valerius loomed over him, raising the sword for the execution. Father was right, Valerius sneered. You were always too soft. Julian looked at the sword. Then he looked at Serafina, who was struggling to stand up, blood on her forehead. I'm not soft, brother, Julian whispered. I'm just precise. Julian pulled a pin from his belt. He hadn't thrown all his gunpowder in the vault. He had strapped a canister to Valerius's armor joint during the Dance of Blades. Julian rolled away. Click. Boom. The explosion shattered the general's knee armor and blew him sideways. Valerius screamed, losing his balance. He tumbled over the low wall, falling into the dark ocean below. Silence returned to the roof. Julian lay on his back, panting, bruised and bleeding. Serafina crawled over to him. Did you just blow up your brother? He'll survive, Julian wheezed. Armor floats. Wait, no it doesn't. Oops. Soldiers were swarming the stairs. They had seconds. We have to jump, Serafina said, looking at the black water far below. I hate swimming, Julian groaned, standing up painfully. Do you trust me? Serafina asked, echoing his words. Julian looked at the woman who had kidnapped him, threatened him, fought beside him, and refused to leave him. With my life, he said. She grabbed his hand. They ran. They leaped off the edge of the citadel. For a moment, they were flying. Then, the icy shock of the ocean. They surfaced, gasping for air. The Sea Viper's longboat was already rowing toward them. Bax pulled them out of the water, cheering wildly. Did you get the gold, Captain? Bax asked. Serafina looked at the citadel burning behind them. No gold backs, but we got something better. She looked at Julian, shivering in the boat, looking back at his former life crumbling away. We got the crown's deadliest secret, she grinned. Dawn broke over the open ocean. The Sea Viper was safe, miles away from the coast. Serafina found Julian on the quarterdeck. He was wearing dry clothes, pirate clothes, a loose white shirt and leather vest. He looked less like a prince and more like a rogue every day. You lost your inheritance, Serafina said, leaning on the rail beside him. You are officially a traitor, a pauper. I have never felt richer, Julian replied. He turned to her. You stayed. On the roof. Why? I protect my investments, Serafina said, trying to keep her voice steady. Liar! Julian stepped closer. The tension that had been building since the brig, through the battles, through the escape, finally snapped. He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed the cut on her cheek. You stayed because you know, he whispered. We are the same. Two monsters running from the dark. Julian, she breathed. Serafina. He kissed her, tasted of sea salt, danger, and freedom. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claim, promise, the assassin and the pirate queen, sealing a pact that would terrify the seven seas. When they broke apart, breathless, Serafina smirked. Does this mean I don't get my ransom? Julian laughed, resting his forehead against hers. I think I can offer a better payment. The world, Captain. Let's take it all. Serafina turned to the crew below. Raise the black flag, she shouted. Set a course for the horizon. The prince stood beside her, his hand on his dagger, his heart finally home. The king had lost a son, but the ocean had gained a legend.